So some of you may play instruments, you may have already written songs, maybe you're a virtuoso, but you are not that adept at actually producing out a full song. Well, have no fear. The fine folks at Monthly have put together a very basic, quick, simple guide to production. Do not fear, I will be the one actually going in and getting in the weeds with you and teaching you how to produce from the ground up. But the very, very rudimental basics of it, Monthly has provided a very brief lesson, just like the Intro to Music Theory lesson. It's about 30, 40 minutes, and it starts right now.
In this lesson, we're going to be talking about some of the basic functions in music software, like what I have in front of me, Logic, although there are other music softwares that have very similar functionality, whether that's Pro Tools or Ableton or something else. If you're experienced producing music, you probably don't need this lesson. You can skip it and you can head right to day one of the class where your instructor is going to take over and show you much more deeply how to produce music, etc. If you're brand new to producing music, this lesson is going to be a great way to get up to speed, to learn some of the basics that you will need to be successful in the class. We're going to talk about some very basic things like recording, creating tracks, picking instruments, soloing a track, muting a track, your metronome. We'll talk about some effects, common effects that are used like reverb, delay, EQ, and we'll also just make sure that you have a lay of the land and understand what is where. And again, if you're not using Logic, it's okay. You can use a different piece of software. All these tools are roughly in all music software. So let's start with one of the most important things that you can do in your music software, and that is creating a new instrument track. So in Logic, that's this plus button here. We click it, we click Software Instrument, and we click Create. You see that creates a new track for us, and this will let us record new software instruments. So we need to pick a software instrument. So if we come over here in Logic, you'll see we have a lot of different choices for potential instruments. Let's try something like Sculpture, which is a built-in synth within Logic. If I click Command K, that brings up this software keyboard where I can use the keyboard of my computer to record or to play notes. Of course, if you have a MIDI keyboard, you can also plug that in to your music software and you can play from your keyboard. But here, we're going to be using our software keyboard. And within all these different sounds and plugins, you'll see that there's oftentimes many different sounds that we can pick from. And this is something you're going to have to get familiar with your particular software. In Logic, there's even, if you click this button up here, a bunch of preset sounds on the left here. So we can try something like mallet and marimba. Or maybe we go to, let's see, maybe keyboards and 80s sine synth. That's pretty nice. So one thing you should make sure you know how to do in your particular music software is how to create new software instruments and how to play those software instruments, whether that's using a software keyboard like this, which again, you can also go to Window Show Keyboard or Command K on a Mac, or you can plug in your MIDI keyboard and play it from there. You'll also want to know how to create an audio track, and this is going to record audio, right? So I could come up here to record. I could click this button. And now I'm recording audio directly into the music software. All right, I stopped it. Now let's play that back. Let's drag our playhead to the beginning. And now I'm recording audio directly into the music software. So you can see that worked. I don't have a microphone set up currently. I'm recording that directly into my computer, so it does sound a little bit funny, but it is important that you also know how to create an audio track and how to record audio. Okay, so those are two important things. And again, let's look at recording, this time with the software instrument. I'm going to click Command K. It's going to bring up the musical keyboard. I'm going to bring the cursor back to the beginning, or I can click the Enter key in Logic, and that brings me to the beginning. I'm going to come up here to the record button, or I can click R in Logic. That's going to give me a 4-beat counting. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I can play.
And now I'm recording audio directly into the music software.
You can see I played on my keyboard and I played it directly into the software. Now, unlike audio, which you can see is this waveform, when you record a software instrument, it creates something called MIDI. So I just double-clicked, and you can see we have what's called the MIDI roll. And the MIDI roll is essentially a digital signal of what you just played. So you can see that we have these bars that actually represent all the notes I just played, which is really cool because unlike audio, we could do some crazy things. For example, I could highlight all of this, and in Logic, I can just click, and I can drag all those notes up.
And now I'm recording audio directly into the music software.
We're gonna drag them down.
And now I'm recording audio.
Right? So maybe I just played one wrong note, maybe this note here. I'm gonna also mute this. We're gonna talk about muting in a second. Okay, that's not the note I wanted to play. So maybe, let's see, maybe try to move it there. All right, those notes aren't right. But I can, if I play a wrong note, I could just move the MIDI. And now it sounds great. Another thing that's cool about MIDI is, let's say I'm trying to follow along to the beat of the song, but I'm a little bit off. You can actually highlight all the notes, or you can click Command A, and then you can come over here to quantize. And every music software will have the ability to quantize. And all quantize means is if you look, you can see this note here, or a lot of the notes, are not quite on the grid. So on the grid means on the beat. But if we come over here and we click the type of note we want to quantize to, say 16th note, and we click Q, you'll see now all these notes are right on the grid lines. Now that might sound good. It might sound more robotic. Let's see. So with the thing I particularly played, this is not exactly what we want. But let's just say, let's delete this and delete this. And let's try to record something that's more straight chords. And for this, I'm going to turn on the metronome, which for me in Logic is up here, this click track. So I click R, but before I click R, I'm going to click Command K to bring up my keyboard. I'm going to click R, and let's play some chords. All right, so I made some mistakes. Let's see how we could fix that with MIDI. So first of all, you see these notes not quite to the beat. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to highlight everything, and we're going to pick quarter note, and you see everything snaps right to the grid. So now let's listen. All right, now I think I might have played a wrong note there at the end, this little note here. So I just highlight and delete it. Perfect. All right, so that's how to edit MIDI, how to quantize to get on the grid, and also to record. So remember, with recording, you want to figure out where your metronome is. You want to know your record button. We have this play button here, which I was using the space bar as the way to start and stop. Another thing you want to look at is the tempo of your project. So up here, we have 120, which means there are 120 beats per minute. But if I drag this down to, let's say, 100, so that's slower. We can drag it up to 145. So when you're creating a song, you have to pick tempo, and this is how you change the tempo of your project. Okay, so we have tempo, we have recording, we have the metronome, which is our little click track, we have MIDI recording that we can edit. We have audio recording, which we can edit, but this is important for things like vocals or guitars, like acoustic guitars or acoustic pianos or things like that. Okay, so this is some of the basic functionality of getting different instruments into your DAW. And let's actually add one more. So I can actually highlight this, let's say, and I can click Command D, or I can duplicate it like this, and we create a new version. And maybe let me pick a different instrument, let's say bass and muted bass. I'm gonna click Command K, I'm gonna click Enter to go back to the beginning, and I'm gonna click Record. All right, so it wasn't the right note, so we just click Command D. Let's figure out our bass line. So we have this note, this note, this note, this note. All right, so Enter, R to record. Great, so we have our bass line. Again, we can highlight it. We go to 16th note, quantize, turn off our metronome. Now, maybe I'm thinking, I really want to hear that bass come through loud and clear. So we need to turn up the volume. So here you can see we have some volume sliders. So if I go like this, it's louder, softer. You can see the sliders also down here. That's kind of where I like it. Now let's say I wanted to keep using this bass line, but I didn't really like the synth. So, or maybe I just wanted to listen to the bass line. So I could come here and I could click mute, this M. And that's gonna let me just listen to this bass because the synth is muted. Or maybe, let's say we had a bunch of tracks. So let's duplicate this track. Let's drag this down. So now we have two different versions of this, and let's change this instrument to something else, like cheap organ. Let's hear how that sounds. So I'm going to mute the bass, I'm going to mute the synth. So that's really loud, so let's turn it down. Let's add this back. Let's add our bass. Okay, so let's say we just want to hear the bass now. Rather than muting all of these tracks, instead we can click this little S button, which solos the track. So it's the only track you're going to hear. Just like that. We can solo multiple tracks if we want. And we click this big S, we'll hear everything. So that's soloing. Now let's say we want to not only change the volume, which we have the sliders here and here, but we also want to change the panning. So you have your left ear and your right ear. And maybe we want to hear this organ sound, which is a little bit hard and sharp. Maybe we want to put it a little bit more towards the left ear to make it take up its own space in the mix. And your instructor will talk more about how to actually compose different parts and placing them in the mix and all of that. But let's say we just want to make it sound a little bit more to the left. We can turn this panning knob down to the left, and let's hear how that sounds. So if you're listening in headphones or maybe just on a computer, that might be coming more from the left. I'm actually playing it right now out of my computer speakers, so it might sound a little bit less to the left than it would in, let's say, headphones, but we can turn it now to the right, and let's hear how that sounds. Let's hear the transition. So you can hear that it's coming from a different side. So let's say we want to make this a little to the left, make this one a little to the right. Let's hear how that sounds. Pretty good. Now, another thing that we'll want to know how to do in Logic is adding effects, and not just Logic, in any music software. So let's highlight a track, and you'll see down here, we have a place to add audio effects to the track. So this is called our track strip, this strip corresponds to this particular instrument. If I click on this instrument, we have this track strip, we have this track strip. You'll notice the Logic sounds come with these pre-built-in effects already applied. But sometimes your sounds may not have any effects applied. In any case, click on your track. There should be some place in your music software to add audio effects. In this case, if we click on this open area, we can add a new plugin. So let's listen to maybe this cheap organ. It sounds a little bit harsh and bright. So those are words that you might hear in the class referring to the quality of the sound. Bright meaning there's a lot of high frequencies. Sharp, also sort of a similar kind of story. And we might want to make it a little bit less bright, remove some of those sharp frequencies. So we might come, and for that we will use an EQ, which is a very common effect used in the class and in music in general. Let's pick channel EQ, and it's gonna look something like this. Let me just play this track while we look at the EQ. So what you'll see as I'm playing that are these bumps and almost this graph. And this graph corresponds to the frequencies that this instrument is playing. Let's compare that to our bass, for example. So let's add an EQ to our bass. You can see our bass is playing much lower frequencies because it is of course a bass. So let's go back to our cheap organ sound. Let's open our EQ and let's open a new EQ. So let's listen to that. All right, so this is our organ. I think before I was looking at the synth, but here's our organ, a lot of different frequencies. And you'll notice that I can pull on this line to bring frequencies higher or lower. And I'm not making the whole thing louder or softer, I'm just making certain frequencies. And I think that'll be most obvious if I show you two things. One, we can take away some of the low frequencies. So now we're just hearing the high frequencies. Or, let's undo that. We can take away the higher frequencies. In this case, I want to remove some of those higher frequencies so it's not as sharp, but I also don't want all these bass frequencies either. So I'm going to bring this in just to here. So let's listen to the before and after. We have this. After. I like that better. So that's one effect that's very common, EQ, and that lets you change frequencies across the entire spectrum. You can boost the middle frequencies or lower the middle frequencies or close off the high frequencies or the low frequencies. So that's a great tool. Another really common tool is reverb. So let's add a little bit of reverb to this cheap organ. Let's come down to reverb. Space Designer is a great built-in reverb into Logic. And let's listen to what it sounds like now. So turning it off, turning it on. So it creates this echo, this large room. We feel this space. And the most important thing you need to know for a reverb are the dry and wet sliders, and then the pre-delay length and size. But really at the end of the day, with all these effects, you'll notice there's a lot of different effect options. It's really about trial and error and just seeing what different knobs do. But in the case of most effects, including reverb, dry and wet are two really important parameters. Dry means the dry signal. In other words, the sound that's coming into this plugin before it gets affected at all. And wet means applying the plugin fully. So let's turn wet all the way up. Let's hear what that sounds like. And all the way down and up. So when we're wet here, we're applying the entire reverb. And as we bring it down, it's almost like we're removing a little bit of the reverb until there's no more reverb being applied. So this is almost like an on and off switch where this is the original signal, the original sound, and this is the applied effect. We turn off the original signal and just hear the effect. Original signal, just the effect. We make the size bigger. Pre-delay is something you can play around with. It just means how long it takes for the reverb to come in. So this is a long pre-delay. So that's reverb. It's something you can play around with. Within most DAWs, most music software, you're going to have a lot of different default reverbs, different options that have all different sounds. So play around with those. So now we're starting to get somewhere. We have our organ sounding like this. This was before we applied the EQ and this reverb, but now it sounds like this. It's at our bass. Let's turn the cheap organ down a little bit. Bring back our synth. Maybe turn the synth down a tiny bit. That sounds pretty good. Let's talk about one more effect, which is delay. This is another really common effect. Let's click on our channel strip and go down to delay, and maybe let's try an echo for right now. Let's see what that does. We just solo that track. You could hear, unsurprisingly, that it creates an echo. And again, the dry and wet, so we have nothing. Full echo. Let's make it pretty subtle. All right, I like that. I think the delay on our reverb is a tiny bit too long. So let's open that back up and let's turn down that pre-delay to something much smaller. Right now let's listen, click enter and then click play. Now let's say we wanted to record some vocals on top of that. We might want to loop the same section over and over. Let's say this is the verse, and sing a bunch of different takes and see which take you like the best. So to loop a section, this is a very common move and action in a DAW, is, in Logic at least, it's this button here, this looping button, and this yellow bar represents the looping area. So if we make it like there and click enter, it's just going to loop this yellow bar section over and over again. So you can see that we're looping it, and we can start adding melodies, we can start recording vocals or trying out different synth lines. And so looping is also a really important thing to make sure you know how to do in your music software. And the final thing that you're going to need to know how to do before the class is exporting your track. During the class, you're going to be sharing your works in progress, your songs, with other students in the class. And so it's important you know how to export your track so other people can listen to them. One thing to note, make sure your metronome is turned off before you export. Otherwise, you're going to hear your metronome in the export. So let's turn that off. Let's come to File, Bounce, Project or Section. And you can pick, for most times, an MP3 if you're just sharing it with friends. PCM, which creates a WAV file. It's a higher quality file for streaming. Let's say if you were to add your song to Spotify, but for now let's just create an MP3. Let's click OK. Let's call this demo, and let's click bounce. And you can see that it's working away, converting everything we have here into an MP3. And there we go. And if we open our Finder and we click, you can see we have our demo song. So exporting is also a really important function. Before class, make sure that you can do all of these basic things in whatever music software you choose, whether that's creating tracks, software tracks, audio tracks. Make sure you can edit MIDI, you can create instruments, or you can add instruments, you can add effects, you know how to record, you know how to set the tempo, you know how to use your metronome, you know how to use a little bit of the EQ, play with the EQ a little bit, play with the reverb, play with the delay. Your instructor is going to be telling you much more about these things as well as many more audio effects, but these are some of the basic ones you can start playing around with. Export something and make sure you come into the class with some comfortability with your software. Your instructor is going to take you much, much further than this lesson, but this is the bare essentials that you're going to want to feel comfortable with before class starts.